Hey everybody, how's it going? Can you all see me and hear me? Okay. Can you hear me and see me okay, everybody? All right, well, I will just assume then that everything's working all right. So welcome back. We're going to do the next part in the whole series we've been doing on diatonic scales. So we've already gone over Ionian, Dorian, and Phrygian, and tonight we're going to take a look at Lydian and you know, how to hook them together, how to use them, and then we're going to do something actually a little bit different with Lydian tonight that we'll get into a bit later. It's a little thing that's going to kind of help train your ear to be able to identify a mode by the sound. And anyhow, we'll get to that in a little bit. All right, so I guess first, just kind of do just a little bit of review. So we started off, we were doing these all in G major. So we've got your first position, your major scale or the Ionian mode. And if this is just the first time you're catching this, the previous live streams are on the channel. You can go check out to get the to get these patterns, because I'm not going to go, you know, like go through them in detail again. So then the second one would be Dorian. So there were 3 notes for string. So notes 2 and 3 of Ionian are notes 1 and 2 of Dorian. And if we go off of the thing we learned, 2 whole steps and a half step, then 3 whole steps and a half step, that you know that when we start here, we've gone 2 whole steps. So that means that the next note has to be there because it's 2 wholes and a half and then 3 wholes and a half. So Dorian here. And then again, move on to the next position, which was Phrygian. So notes 2 and 3 of Dorian are notes 1 and 2 of Phrygian. So we know that the next note is going to be a whole step because one, we just went 2 whole steps and then a half step. So this next one's a whole step. And you don't do 3 half steps in a row in diatonic scales. All right, so then that leads us to what we want to go over tonight, which is Lydian. Now, last week when I showed you Phrygian, I was saying about how I'd had difficulty when I was learning this, memorizing that pattern. Well, that one was really bad, but Lydian, I believe, was far worse. This one has, I don't know what it was. I had a real mental block with trying to be able to remember this. So here, again, since there's notes 2 and 3 of the previous pattern we're working with, which was Phrygian. So we're going to start there. So we're on the 8th fret of the low E to the 10th and then to the 12th. And just like I said before, if you can do it this way, or you can do it this way, whichever way is more comfortable. For me, it's more comfortable to do that. Yeah, so we have the 2 whole steps there. And now when we move up to the A string, we start up half step up. So now we're on the 9, 10, 12. And then to the D string, 9, 10, 12. To the G string, 9, 11, 12. And now when we go to the B string, we shift up a half step again. So now we're 10, 12, 13, and then 10, 12, 14. So this one, it's really, it's the weirdest one. Whoops. To me, in my opinion, it's the weirdest, sequence. I had such a hard time memorizing it. But there's a lot of cool things that can be done with Lydian. We'll talk about that here pretty soon. All right. So again, we don't want to memorize this based off of what frets we're on, because that would only apply if you were playing in G major or in C Lydian. So you just want to memorize the shape. That's the best way to put it, is just memorize the shape. 2 whole steps, then a half and a whole, half and a whole, whole and a half, shift up, whole and a half, 2 whole. All right, now what we want to do is kind of those same exercises that we did before. Are they not all the same patterns but just moved up? Well, no, the pattern, the pattern for like Ionian is the same no matter what key you're in. But when you, and this is something we talked about in the previous lessons with this. So just quickly, if we're in the key of G major, the notes that are in that key are G, A, B, C, D, E, F sharp, and then back to G. So it's all naturals except the F is F sharp. So when we play the Dorian pattern, it's actually starting on A, and it's playing the same 7 notes. It's just starting 1 note later and ending 1 note later. So here we started on G and we ended on F sharp. Now we're going to start on A and we're going to end on G. A, B, C, D, E, F sharp, G. Then back to A again. So yeah, each time you move up, you're playing the same notes, but you're not playing them in the same order. So wherever you're starting is kind of like your, the tonal center. Anyhow, that's a whole modal thing that we will be talking about that, but we want to just get through all the patterns first. But yes, that's a great question. Does anybody, before I move on, does anybody else have any questions or anything? I don't know if my voice is going to hold out. We got some big wildfires near where I live, and the air quality is terrible right now. So nobody else has any questions? All right. So moving along, what we want to do, first you want to memorize the pattern, and if you didn't, already get it or whatever, you can, at the end of the video, you can go back, you can watch it again. I'll probably go over the pattern a dozen more times at least before this is over. So anyhow, we want to do the same kind of exercises that we did before, but now we're going to add in Lydian into the rotation. So if we start here on the first position on Ionian, we ascend that all the way to the top. So those notes there are the first and second note of the next position. So I just shift into that position, and now I descend. So this would be the Dorian shape. Now I shift up, I play the Phrygian shape. Now I shift up and I descend the Lydian shape. It's like the 3rd time I've made that same mistake descending this scale. Okay, so then do it the opposite way. So now we're going to start with Lydian. We're going to ascend it. Whoops. And now I'm going to shift down, descend Phrygian. Oh my gosh, I'm doing great today. Shift down, ascend Dorian. Shift down, descend Ionian. So, and I went through these exercises in much more detail in the earlier lessons. I mean, I just don't want to just keep repeating the same thing. But yeah, you want to go both ways so that you're getting practice ascending the patterns and descending the patterns. It's important to, that you can go both ways with it. And then the other one where you just play the 6 notes, shift up. It's like that, it can get monotonous with doing it. That's why, I've tried to show you so many different exercises. You don't have to do the same ones all the time, but it is important that you do the exercises though. You want to know the only way you can really utilize this is if it just comes natural, if you're not having to think about it. It's just like if, when you're speaking and, you got the app where you learn the new word of the day or whatever, if you don't really understand the word and can't pronounce it right or whatever and use it in the right context, it's not really done anything for your vocabulary. So it's kind of the same thing with this. You learn these patterns and like learn how they work, but you really got to be able to execute them and stuff. And it's not just a thing of like, oh, so you can play really fast or whatever. Speed, it doesn't have anything. Speed has nothing to do with it. It's just having the vocabulary under your fingers. So that way you can just play whatever. You can really utilize the specific sounds that the different modes have. So that way you can really, really kind of use a way to like express yourself more with playing. All right. So, well, before we move on, any questions thus far then about any of this, the exercises, the new pattern, Lydian, anything? All right. So I had planned on waiting until after we'd gone through all of the patterns before we did this, but I think it isn't going to matter. Once you get the general idea of how this works, as you learn the other patterns, it's easy to apply them to this. So there is a theme song to a TV show that is out of the Lydian mode. Does anybody know what that is? One of the longest running TV shows of all time, the theme music for it, the melody of that theme music is from the Lydian mode. Anybody? And you could have Googled it in this length of time and cheated. Okay, so what it is, it's the theme to The Simpsons. The little melody from that has a very distinct. You can recognize that melody line. Anyhow, it's right out of the Lydian mode. So what we're going to do is I want to show you how to play that, and then I want to show you how to play it in the other modes that we've already done. So that way you can hear the difference. You'll be able to hear the difference between the, well, it's what it's going to do is it's going to change the intervals. It's going to change the space between some of the notes. Some of them will stay the same. And some modes, it doesn't matter which one, they're the same sequence no matter what anyway. But, well, you'll see here in a second. So how I want to do this, and this I have never bothered to like actually sit down and figure out what key they're actually playing that in. So if this happens to be in the right key, if somebody checks or whatever, it's purely coincidence. I just mostly did this just because whenever I'm doing stuff with teaching, I try to stay kind of in this area as much as possible, just because, especially for beginners, it's kind of a neutral spot. They're not too far one way or the other where it's putting a lot of, a lot of stress on their arm or something. And then with the camera, so you can just see better. Although with this new camera, it seems to be pretty wide, so it doesn't seem to be an issue. Okay, so we're going to do it with Phrygian or Lydian starting on A. So that was the new pattern that we went over tonight, right? So what we're going to do is we're going to look at what number note I'm doing here. So on each string, there's 3 notes, right? So on the low E, this is note 1, this is note 2, this is note 3. And then on the A string, 1, 2, 3, so on and so forth. So if we memorize this based off of what number it is within the scale, then when we go to move it to a different scale, you just do the same principle. So here we're on the note number 2 on the D string, to note number 1 on the G string, to note number 1 on the B string, and then back to note number 2, whoops, to note number 3 on the G string. Back to note number 1, now to note number 2 on the D string, to the 3rd one on the A string, to the 1st, and then the 2nd. So here I'll play it slowly. Hopefully, I'm hoping that you're trying to get this and try to do this along, play this with me, so you can really see how this all this stuff works. Right, now what I'm going to do is I'm going to play that melody, but I'm going to use it from the spacing of a different scale. So I'm just going to use it with Ionian. So if we were playing Ionian starting on A, so some of the notes are going to be the same, but other ones are not. Let me try that again. So here's the original. That's Lydian. Now here it is with Ionian. Can you hear the difference? So if you hear that difference, you could, if you just heard that in Lydian, that melody, you would recognize it right away because you probably heard it 6 million times over your life. But if I play it in Ionian and I hadn't told you what it was, you more than likely wouldn't have guessed that's what it was. Maybe if you're a real diehard Simpsons fan or something. I don't know. So anyhow, what you want to do is this will help to train your ear to be able to recognize when you hear a melody, whether it be played on the guitar, just in a song, a vocal melody, anything, to be able to identify where it's from. because that can help you, that can aid with figuring out how to play it by ear. One of the problems that I had when I started learning anything other than pentatonic scale, and I think I showed you the very first major scale pattern learned was like that. So it wasn't 3 notes per string. Some strings only had 2 notes. It was really not versatile as the 3 note per string was. That's just my opinion. But anyway, when I was playing this, I would try to figure out. Oh, from Russia, awesome! Thanks for tuning in. Tube amp cat, cool. Yeah, so I would start to try to figure out things by ear, and then what would happen is that I would end up, there'd be a note that when I play the scale, it was supposed to be here, but in the melody, maybe it was that note, but everything else was the same, and I couldn't figure out why, it didn't make any sense. Well, that was because it was, with the melody I was trying to play, instead of being played in Ionian, it may have been like that. Maybe it was in Lydian or in Phrygian or whatever. I don't have any. This is all stuff from when I very first started. But so that's another one of the great benefits of just learning all these patterns, is just for figuring out stuff by ear. And then it also, if you're into songwriting, it just gives you a much bigger palette of stuff that you can work with. Like I said, it's like increasing your vocabulary. So here we got it with Lydian. And then with Ionian. So now we could try it with Dorian. So that one sounds quite a bit different. Whoops. And then, see, with Phrygian, that would. Let's see, wait a minute, we're doing Phrygian. Oh my gosh. Yeah, that one's like really weird. Again, like I said before, Phrygian and Lydian, those two shapes, they still apparently cause me a little bit of hang up. Yeah, so if you add that one into the rotation, get it so you have all of those patterns. You're playing them both ascending and descending, and doing these exercises like where you just keep going up like that, because you want, like I said before, that it really can open up your improvising and stuff if you can start thinking about the fretboard instead of being in boxy patterns like this, that you can play it, but more horizontally across the fretboard like that. And by seeing how they all connect together and intersect, and not always starting at the very bottom of the scale or very top of the scale, having the ability to start within the scale. So something that I think that maybe I did say this, but I don't remember, is that while you're doing the exercise like this, you want to keep track of where you are in the scale. So you can do that by, you don't necessarily have to say it out loud. You can just think it in your mind, but like, okay, Ionian, Dorian, Phrygian, Lydian, Ionian, Dorian, Phrygian, Lydian, and just work your way through it like that. So you know where you are within it, because so that way when you're going to play, you're going to improvise, like, you pull up a jam track on YouTube or something and it says that it's in G major. You're like, okay, well, I know I can play in G major. Ionian, I have the second position, the third, and now the fourth. But you don't want it to be that like, okay, well, here I'll start on G and I'll just start playing up the scale. You want to be able to start wherever, whether that be, you want to be able to navigate around through it, not having to be within the box, just to kind of jump in wherever you want. Keys that you play in a lot, you'll really see where before you even start playing, you can just glance at your fretboard and just visually see where those patterns, where they lay over the top of each other and stuff. So it's really, it just really gets in your head. And that's why I've said before too, is that I encourage you to not always play in the same key, practice these in different keys. I mean, when you're first learning the pattern, it's good to do it in one place so that way you can focus on the frets to make sure you're getting the shape down. Once you have it down, don't always start on G, do that same exercise, but start on G sharp. Or whoops. Work your way up like that. So that way you don't inadvertently get used to that the fret markers are always, the notes are always landing on the fret markers in certain places and stuff like that. And like I said, I always started on the first fret because I thought, oh, well, I'm going to, utilize the whole fretboard. And I just got really good at playing in F major. And then when I go to play in another key, I couldn't do it because that's all I ever did was practice in F major. So you really want to make sure you mix it up. After you have these down and you're just going through the motions of practicing the exercises, just change your key every day. You got 12 of them. So just run through them, and it doesn't need to be, you don't need to do like F and then tomorrow do F sharp and then the next day do G. You can mix it around or whatever, but I would just make sure that all of them get hit. In fact, mixing them around is probably best anyway, but you just want to make sure you get all your bases covered, and so you don't get stuck in one key. All right, so does anybody have any questions about any of this that we've been talking about? Does anybody have any questions that, not necessarily about this, but just, guitar stuff in general? I think it's time we could play Stump the Dummy. And then, as always, with all these picking exercises, alternate picking. So important, alternate picking. So nobody has any questions or anything? All right. Well, if nobody has any questions or anything, I think I'm gonna wrap it up for tonight. I'd like to thank everybody who thanks. Yeah, I'm a big Slayer fan. All right. Well, I'd like to thank everybody who came out tonight. I know it's a little bit shorter than normal, but the longer I do this, the worse I'm the throat, and I'm starting to cough and stuff now. So I think I'm going to call it for tonight if nobody has any questions or anything. But like I said, thanks everybody who came out. I appreciate it. And I will be here again next week. It's like going to be for the time being anyway, it's going to be every Wednesday thing, as a general rule. All right. Well, thank you. Thanks, everybody. And I will see you in the next one. Have a great night.